Hi everyone, Tish here and welcome back to my channel Auto Social UK. You join me in the beautiful and very sunny Malaga where I'm testing out the facelifted version of the Peugeot 508. I'm specifically going to be driving the very spicy PSE version because the non-PSE version that they have here in Spain we're not actually getting in the UK. So I'm not going to be testing out that engine, but I am going to be driving the performance model. However, can I complain that I'm testing out the performance variant? Because the 508 PSE has some very impressive figures. This thing has a whopping 360 brake horsepower. It's also four-wheel drive. But there is something that dulls its sparkle, and that's the fact that when you run out of the electric, because this is a hybrid, it's then not quite so impressive. But don't fear, I'll tell you all about that in today's video. So if that sounds good, please keep watching. And if you like new car reviews and car content, then go ahead and hit the subscribe button. So I actually tested out the 508 PSE probably around a year ago, and I was really impressed with it. There's a PSE badge, and it's worn by the Peugeot 508 PSE. I was mostly impressed by the looks. This is a fantastic looking car. It's very, very striking. In fact, I think personally it's one of the best looking station wagons that money can buy. So what did the facelift bring to the 508? Well, of course, it brought that new front badge, the larger Peugeot badge, and you've also got this new frontage to the car. I'm actually not too sure how I feel about this personally. I love the look of the new Peugeots. The 408 is fantastic. I love the 308. But there's something about this face on the 508 that I'm not too sure about. It may just be the fact that I loved the previous car so much. I loved its styling that I'm not completely sold on this one yet, but it may be a grower. Let's wait and see. One of the reasons that I think I don't like it quite as much as previous may be because it doesn't look quite as mean. Something which has 360 brake horsepower, I want there to be a hint of that. And on the previous generation car, you had slightly more of an overhanging bonnet, which gave it a bit of a meaner look. It's slightly been softened, if I can say that. However, it still looks great, and let me know, what do you think? Do you prefer the new generation of 508 or do you prefer the previous generation? The rear design remains very much the same, which is no bad thing. It's sharp and aggressive, and the gloss black diffuser houses a couple of large twin tailpipes. I even love the fins aside the bumper. The main thing that's changed is the rear lights, which are now tilted in the opposite direction. Peugeot makes some cracking alloy wheels, and these turbine style ones are the creme de la creme, wrapped in Michelin Pilot Sport 4 tyres, and the new emblem placed proudly in the centre of the wheels just to finish it off. The updates for 2023 have also brought some fresh colours to the range, this Ockantine white being one of them. It now has hints of silvery blue that glisten in the Spanish sun. Very nice. Regardless of which colour you go for, they all work quite nicely with the signature fluorescent green elements. Peugeot have also ditched the 508 nameplate on the bottom, and now just a simpler three-line logo is in its place. The sharp looks of the 508 are enough to steer me away from more premium rivals, but it is that price which has always been a sticking point. The new 508 PSE will set you back around £55,000. That's £5,000 more than a BMW 330e xDrive M Sport Touring. Unfortunately, you buy the Peugeot because you enjoy being a little bit different, not because you're watching your wallet. Rear space is pretty good, but the low roof can make it feel a tad claustrophobic for some adults. A 530-litre boot in the estate is nice though, achieved by the batteries being neatly tucked away rather than approaching on the luggage space. It does all feel a bit dark inside though, especially in the rear. This is a little bit different for me, but I'm going to take advantage of the fact that I've got the engine running and the aircon is on, because currently it's 35 degrees outside and it's way too hot to be parked up and talking about the interior. So I'm going to talk about the interior whilst driving. It does feel a little bit like a game of spot the difference, because I don't exactly remember what the interior of the 508 PSE previously looked like. As far as I'm aware, feels like Peugeot have taken the kind of carbon elements and they've replaced them with a wooden trim. Unless that's an option, I'll check in a second. But I really like it. I didn't think I would. I always quite like carbon. But actually, I think because the Peugeot always feels a little bit higher market, perhaps a little bit more grown up, actually the use of wood trim inside, it really works very well. It feels very classy. The setup is the same, and that's good because it all feels very driver focused. They've actually started to ditch the 3D cockpits. You now kind of just have a digital screen across the cockpit, which I think is a good thing, because the 3D was great when it first was released, but then it became a little bit of a fad. It wasn't quite as good as some of the screens on the market. So I'm glad that Peugeot have, you know, stood up and said, yeah, we're gonna leave the iCockpit for now. It's still called an iCockpit, but it's a new generation. You've got the new infotainment system as well. It's slightly different in the way that it's laid out, and you can add widgets and stuff like that, but you still do get the fantastic piano keys, which I'm really glad to see. They make using this car and using it whilst driving really easy, because you can hit those. It's a little bit annoying that there isn't just a physical button to turn up and turn down the temperature, because that would be handy, but at least it does have those keys. This centre console is all in the right position. You've got the cup holders in the right position, nice amount of storage in the armrest. I also like the way that the kind of drive modes are all positioned, and the gear selector, they're all in the places you'd hope to find them. The setup is just brilliant. I also love the way that it's almost a little bit of a shelf in this car. Now, if I remember correctly, the seats in the previous generation car were a little bit nicer. I'm not sure if I'm just imagining that, and if I am, I'm probably going to put something on the screen to say, yep, she was imagining it. But I seem to remember a slightly sportier setup on the seats. That's not a bad thing. These are still pretty nice. You still get the contrasting yellow stitching on the seats and across the dashboard. It all feels very high quality, but I don't think they're quite as bucketed as the ones that I tried previously. But either way, they're really nice. They're quilted. You've got the mix of Alcantara and leather. Just a really, really nice cabin. And I think that Peugeot were way before their time when it came to interiors. Their interiors have been so much better than the competition for years now. So perhaps this doesn't feel like quite a drastic change as some people may expect for like a midlife refresh. But I think that it's more than enough to keep this car current. Since its release, the Peugeot 508 PSE is actually no longer Stellantis' only performance four-wheel drive hybrid, because now they've also released the Vauxhall Grandland GSE. However, that doesn't get quite as much power, and for me, a station wagon will always be just that little bit cooler than an SUV. I also think it's just more practical as well. You get tons of boot space inside this estate, and it's just a little bit different. We've got so many SUVs on the roads nowadays that actually station wagons and estates and even the saloons have become a little bit rarer. They just feel that better connection because you sit down lower. You don't get the same connection in an SUV. 508 PSE's engine setup remains the same as previously, and that still makes it the most powerful production car that Peugeot have ever built. That is quite a statement, and perhaps if you hold it to such high pretensions as that, it may not live up to expectations. But put that aside, and at the best part, the Peugeot 508 PSE is an absolute joy to drive. So it pairs together a 1.6 litre petrol engine, and then you've got an electric motor both on the front and the rear of the car, making it all-wheel drive when you have both motors running. Sorry, I'm not sure if that was quite clear. That was my face as I put my foot down. It's about 0 to 62 in around, I think it's 5 point something seconds, so just over 5 seconds. You don't always get the best engine note out of this car, predominantly because it is a hybrid, so they're not focusing on making this have a really noisy, loud exhaust, but actually most of the time it's quite nice because it means that it's really quiet and quite kind of calming when you're driving it. So if you don't want to be throwing it around and kind of thrashing it and using all of that power, you can use it as a much more subtle hybrid for running around town, and then it feels just really quite nice. However, if you did want to demand some power from it, you can do that as well. And of course, because it has those electric motors on the front and rear, it means that the performance is really quite impressive. Now pair this together with the fact that of course it gets Peugeot's little steering wheel, which all Peugeot enthusiasts actually love, and the reason they love it is because it makes such a big car, a station wagon, feel like a little go-kart. It's absolutely great for just throwing it around. It corners really well. This is where definitely having an estate is far better than going for an SUV. Where an SUV will lull around a little bit, the Peugeot 508 is definitely more connected to the road. You have that nice low seating position. It feels nice and sporty. It lives up to your expectations. This is a car that for me just has such a great personality because it's so adaptive. You can drive it like a little rally car and throw it around the corners and put your foot down and feel that pace from the engine. But also if you want to drive it as a company car, you can drive it around town in electric for around 26 miles, and then you're saving on that fuel economy as well. Let's quickly for a second talk about that fuel economy, because of course the ideal candidate for a person that's going to be driving the 508 PSE is somebody that does very little miles, who can take a full advantage of charging it at home and running it pretty much fully on electric. It's good to have the backup of the engine, but you have to remember that because all of the kind of power that comes from the rear is all an electric motor, so once that's gone, it's then just a very heavy front wheel drive car, and it's not exactly the best. So if you are thinking of buying one of these cars, if you've got deep pockets, then perhaps you would have to consider the fact, can you charge at home, and would you be able to run it on fully on electric for the majority of the time? And if you can say yes to both of those kind of options, and you want something that's different to everything else out there, then I say go for it. Peugeot's highest performance production car ever made. That's a pretty bold statement, right? And I wasn't sure when I first drove the Peugeot 508 PSE whether this was going to be a car that they were going to continue to build. I mean, you hardly ever see them on the roads. I'm pretty sure the ones you only ever see are the ones which have been registered to dealers and then sold on afterwards. However, I'm really glad that for this new generation of face shape, they've decided to still run with the PSE 508. It may not be the boldest choice when it comes to its competition, but do you know what? Choice. That is the most important thing here. I'm really glad that Peugeot have decided to still offer it to customers. It might not be a big seller to them, but it means a lot to the brand. But let me know, what do you think of the 508 Peugeot PSE? Pop it in the comments down below. If you have enjoyed the video, please do go ahead and give it a big thumbs up. And if you want to see more videos like this, then you know what to do. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button.